Hey, 𝗪𝗪𝗥𝗏𝗀𝗛 here. We're going to get started in just a second. Gus, give me a shout out on text because I'm not seeing whether people are on, whether I'm reaching people or not. So let me know there. HTA's in the house. Hey, good to see you. I'm going to set my stuff up here really quick, Gus, while I'm waiting on you to just give me that high sign that things are good. Looking at it. Okay, looks like we're good. I'm going to get started here in a split second. I just want to make sure I got my slide because I got a lot of tips to share with you today. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it. I got a lot of stuff, and I'm going to go through pretty fast. So just bear with me, and we'll get some good stuff going. If you don't know who I am, I'm 𝗪𝗪𝗥𝗏𝗛𝗀𝗛. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Live where I discuss process and procedures for you to achieve success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting, it's not a secret, it's just a process. If we follow the process A to Z, for example, then we will achieve the success we expect at the other end. And the more we improve that process, the more success will happen for us. So I'm really excited about that. Today, we're going to talk about how to reach out through email to federal buyers or even teaming partners in a way that lands us meetings. And so we're going to rock and roll on that. You might have seen from the splash screen, I was asking you just do a quick hello and let me know your core competency. I like coming back in because I work with a lot of people who say, do you know somebody who does this? And the more I can learn what you do, the more it's in my memory when the question is asked and the more chance I can refer you. Also, it's a great opportunity for a community. So as I'm talking, although I'm going to go really fast, if there's connections you can make on the chat, I love that because it happens without me. But somehow we're enabling it just by having the event every day. And that's a rewarding thing. Okay, so let me get back here really quick. So today's topic, how to write emails to federal buyers that get meetings. And you can understand that this is for you if you recognize these two scenarios. One is you're writing emails, trying to get a meeting, and no responses are coming back, right? It's not even that maybe they're rejecting you. Perhaps they're rejecting you, but the worst thing is when they're not writing back, right? So I'm going to touch on that. And then the other is, you've got this feeling that if they could just know about my product or service, I'm sure they would buy what I sell, right? We're the best at data or at drones or construction, whatever it is. If the customer could just hear how great we are and our ideas on how the agency could be improved, et cetera, then they would want to work with us. Well, that's where I want to go. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. 10 tips. Actually, I might throw a bonus in if we have time for an 11 one, but 10 tips on how to land that meeting through your first email. I talk about follow-up emails, how to go after elusive buyers, things like that. But today is all about that first email. How do you write an email? How do you get an email coming across in their inbox that makes them want to schedule a meeting with you? And so if you follow the tips I suggest, if you begin to develop the skills that are around what I'm teaching you today, then you will see more and more success that will lead you to more and more meetings with buyers that hopefully will lead to more and more revenue and wins, right? That's where we're really trying to go. I do want to talk to you about just perspective, putting things in perspective. If you don't know me, right, then maybe you don't know that I've got 30 years of sales experience. So I've been in the government selling $1 billion-dollar opportunities or pursuing those for the last 20 plus years. But before that, I was doing sales in the B2C level to the consumer, newspapers when I was 10 or 12, vacuum cleaners door to door when I was 18. And when you sell vacuum cleaners door to door, you knock on all the doors. And so as I go along, sometimes I'm going to knock on a door and they're not going to answer. Sometimes I'll knock on the door and they'll slam in my face and like, you're not for me. I don't want a vacuum cleaner. I was looking for fire extinguisher salesman. And sometimes I knock on the right door and they want to have a meeting, me coming in, showing them the vacuum cleaner, and then sometimes they buy. And what I want you to understand is you're going to knock on a lot of doors and not all of them will be open. And not all of the ones that are open are going to lead to a meeting and not all the meetings will lead to a sale. But the way that works is the sales life cycle. You knock on a lot of doors and you will make sales. There's a lot of, details that go into that, but that's the gist of it. Knock on a lot of doors and you will achieve the success you want. And so something you might put in your mind that just reminds you every day. And I tell myself, even when I do what I do now with all this experience, I still remind myself that some will, some won't. So what? Some people will buy from me, some won't. So what? Some people will do what I'm looking for them to do, some won't. So what? And the so what is not a negative thing. It's just like, don't dwell on the ones who don't. You need the ones who don't. They're kind of like the dirt, if you will, around gold nuggets. If you go into a gold mine, you're digging through a ton of dirt to get to the gold. The gold is what gets you the millions of dollars you want, right? The revenue. But you have to go through a lot of dirt. And so you have to remove all the dirt, make a lot of calls, or reach out to a lot of people who might say no, and then you'll find the gold. Keep that in mind as we go forward. My goal is to help you have 10 tips that'll lead to people answering those emails, but some will, some won't. So what? Okay, let's get started on the 10 tips here. First one is, speaking of, having a good attitude when you're going in, you just have to assume the meeting is going to happen. When you're reaching out to somebody, reach out with the confidence that they want the meeting and you want the meeting. And really all you're doing is trying to schedule a day and time. So assume you'll get the meeting. Tip number one. Tip number two, and by the way, these aren't necessarily in any particular order, but they flow as best I can at the moment. You can see all this stuff back here is me brainstorming on how best to deliver it to you today. But as I go through, I'm going to go through it really fast with these tips. So if you want a handout, I'll tell you how you can get a handout later that has all these tips. So tip number one is assume you're going to get the meeting. Tip number two is to make sure you're knocking on the right door, right? If I'm here to help you send emails that land meetings, I got to make sure you're knocking on the right door. So think about when I was a vacuum cleaner salesperson, I sold very expensive vacuum cleaners. So I'm not going into apartment buildings where people are paying rent and knocking on the door saying, buy a $400 vacuum cleaner, right? I knock on the 4,000 square foot houses where people got too much money. And I say, hey, spend some of that too much money on a $400 vacuum cleaner. And when you know that you're knocking on the right door, you increase the chances of success. So when I start knocking on big doors with Mercedes in the driveway, there's a good chance they could pay me $400 for a vacuum cleaner. It's the same thing here. When you're knocking on a door, you could be knocking on a large prime contractor's door, right? Booz Allen, Leidos, or you could be knocking on a federal agency's door, or you could be knocking on a small business teaming partner's door. I want you to sit there and figure out which ones should you be knocking on. If you're not really making any money or have no federal experience, you should only be knocking on small business doors. That's where you gain your experience. That's where you get your first $3 to $5 million in revenue as a teaming partner with smalls. And then as you graduate in experience and maturity, you knock on agency doors. And then from that point, you knock on large doors. When you think about which door you're knocking on and you want success from the tips I'm going to give you, which doors should you really be knocking on today? Do you have the prime past performance, the agency experience, maybe the contract vehicles a large would be attracted to? Knock on a large's door. Otherwise, knock on an agency's door if you have federal experience, or knock on a small's door if you're still in that early 5 million below range. Really quick in the chat, if you know what it is, just throw in something that says small, large, or agency. Let me know which doors are you knocking on, small, large, or agency. Just one, because whatever you choose at the highest, I'll know that it's everything else below. Okay, so the next tip number 3, and again, I know I'm blowing through here really fast, so don't worry about it. The tip sheet, the handout will be have these much clearer for you, or lay it out clearly. So tip number 3, I want you to leave a voicemail before you even send that first email. And generally 4 hours in between. I talked on Friday, I think, about how do you go after elusive buyers. And I gave this 30-day approach to going after a buyer where you just never stop, right? You're not trying to be a pest, but you are trying to be persistent. And so in that 30-day set of steps I was talking about, the first 2 steps you take are you introduce yourself via voicemail, because most people don't answer their phone these days. And when you do that, you follow up with an email saying, hey, just following up to the voicemail. And on the voicemail, you said, hey, I'm going to send you an email. If they listen to both of them, you've touched or engaged that person, that buyer you're trying to reach, twice. And when you've done that, you're kind of in their mind. And so if you left a voicemail that they listen to, when they turn to their inbox, your email will become more obvious in their mind. They will want to sit there and look at it, read it, maybe even respond to it because they just heard you in a voicemail. Maybe they liked what they heard, or it just somehow brings you top of mind to them. Whatever it is, start with a voicemail, and then 4 hours later, give it some time, send an email saying just following up to the voicemail. Okay, tip number 4, be concise. In an email, people only have like 2 seconds, 2 seconds before they decide whether they're going to look at that anymore and move on. And so you want a very concise email. And my tips for how do you write a concise email, and I'll go in a little bit and talk about framework and outline later. But concise, here's a great baseline for how to write a concise email. Every line that you write or every paragraph, make it 150 characters or less. And inside of an email, make sure there's no more than 4 paragraphs, these bulleted lines, not bullet, don't use bullets, but these paragraphs that come in. They're very short and concise, each one of them. And it makes it easy for that person to read them. So if somebody opens your email and they look at it, they're going to be able to quickly get what you want to do. And so that's why you want to write it concise and snappy, like right into the point. The other thing for you is it makes it easy to be able to focus on what you're truly trying to get from this email. The objective of this email is to get a meeting. If it's concise, it makes it easier for the other person to read it and perhaps respond to you. Inside of that concise email, tip number 5 is mention that you did your agency homework. Somehow you want to be talking about, I looked at your agency, I did my homework. In fact, let me use a real example. Just this morning, I posted a Department of Veteran Affairs data strategy into my LinkedIn. You can go look at it. But they had a data strategy, right? And so I put it out, and inside of there, I had like 7 or 8 of the leaders of the office that manages data strategy, the Office of Enterprise Integration, I think it was called. But anyways, that data strategy was led by this one person. And let's say I want to reach out to this guy. I think his name's Mr. Paul. And if I want to reach out to him, part of what I could do in that email when I'm talking about mention that I did my homework is, hey, I just finished reading your data strategy and it was excellent, especially, goal number 3, which was this or something, right? Something very quick and to the point that lets him know that I just studied what he puts out. When I do that, this person will appreciate the fact that I did my homework before reaching out. You must know that sometimes we get people who call us and you can tell they haven't prepared. Even if it's somebody trying to sell us, health insurance or whatever on the phone, and they don't even know about what you're doing. I get this sometimes in the work that I do with, your peers around the industry, where people might reach out to me and ask me a specific question on succeeding in the federal government. But the thing is, they haven't read my material or watched my videos. And if they had, they would realize that the number one thing I want small businesses to do is to update their DSBS profile. But if they sent me an email saying they want to connect, can we get an intro call or something? If they said in that first paragraph, hey, I watched your videos, more than one, on DSBS and I went and updated it and I feel like I got a rockin' DSBS profile. I'd love to follow up or something. Well, when I see that, I'm like, this person has done their homework. Least I can do is try to meet with them, right? Some will, some won't, some won't, so what? But that's a good line to let the other person know. And it's the same thing I'm trying to do with this guy, Mr. Paul in the VA, is let him know I've read your data strategy and my questions and my call, my meeting that I want is going to be based on that, not some random chit chat. Okay, that was number 5. Number 6 is when you're writing an email, give them 2 specific dates, right, that you want to meet with 4 times. And so what I mean is today is, I don't even know what day today is, like Wednesday, I think. That's pretty bad that I can't remember. But today is the beginning of the week. I would say to Mr. Paul, hey, next week on Tuesday or Thursday, I'm available at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. either day. Would that work for you? What I'm trying to do, what I am doing is assuming we're going to meet. What I'm trying to do is to see if I can give you 2 days and 4 times that you can then pick one of those that is open. And if you can, for a 30-minute meeting, you'll come back to me, right? And it makes it easier. We're not having all this dialogue. He's going, yes, Thursday at 2 p.m. works perfect for me. Why don't you send me an invite? Will do. Thanks, Mr. Paul. Right? So give them 2 days and 4 times. The next tip, going with what I just said there, was ask for a virtual 30-minute meeting. In this case, and I'm just watching my time here. In this case, there's 2 tips I have in one. I said virtual and 30-minute meeting. So let me start with a 30-minute meeting. When you're doing a brand new meeting, you don't need an hour. What you're trying to do is to have a first meeting. So spend less of that person's time and be really prepared to go in, do an intro. And if the meeting is run well, and I do other videos on how to have a successful meeting, but if it's run well, then you'll be able to schedule a meeting coming out of that one to say, hey, why don't we have a follow-up? I can bring one of my technical people and we can have a deeper conversation, something like that, right? And so you want to aim for a 30-minute meeting. By also doing this, you're communicating subliminally that I respect your time. And I'm not trying to take a big chunk of it, Mr. Paul. I'm just trying to take 30 minutes. And he might appreciate that. Oh, good. I don't have to waste an hour with somebody I don't know. I'm just going to meet with them for 30 minutes. And at the very least, it's just 30 minutes. It makes it easier for him to accept. The second thing going with that makes it easier for him to accept is make your intro meeting virtual. I've spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal space, but the last 10 years, my last company, 90% of who I worked with within the federal government was all virtual, right? So this is all back in the 2007 to 2017 timeframe. And all of those people were virtual. You can establish really good virtual relationships. So don't let anybody tell you have to meet people in person. If you meet somebody in person, you get a little bump up in value. That's cool, but you get no loss for not meeting them. So if you're here and you meet with them, you get a little extra credit, but you don't lose anything on there. But what you do gain when you ask for a virtual meeting instead of a physical meeting is a much more increased likelihood that they'll accept. When they accept a virtual meeting, all they have to do is accept to get on a phone or maybe a Teams meeting with you, Zoom or something, right? But when they are accepting a physical meeting, it's a big process. I got to make sure you're cleared to come in. I've got to go downstairs to the front gate and get you through. And God forbid they have a whole bunch of people coming through at the same time. It'll take forever. And then I have to, move around, and then I got to escort you back out. It becomes all this huge extra stuff. And if you're driving there and traffic somehow messes with your timeline, then you're not in on time. Maybe you're missing the meeting, all this kind of stuff. But if it's virtual, you just pick up the phone and you call. So keep it virtual, and it increases the likelihood that they'll accept your request to meet with them. Next tip, number 8, is no capability statement. For those of us who are small businesses and we're sending something and people say, hey, send your capability statement, don't listen to them. And here's why I give this opinion on this, is because of multiple reasons. One is, if you're sending an email to get a meeting, the capability statement will become a distraction. They might begin to open it and look at that, and then somebody comes in and says, hey, Joe, I'm doing this thing. And they come away from their computer and it just goes down in the inbox, even if they were starting to engage it. The other thing is, if you're trying to set up a meeting and you've got this concise email and it's working, but if you send a capability statement and it starts talking about this other stuff, then the person you're trying to meet with, the person you determined was the right one, might go, well, I'm not the right one for you. And sorry, I can't help you. And so it gives them a reason to say no. Take away any of the reasons for saying no. And a capability statement at this point is an example of that. Oh, you belong in another office, not ours. It's like, no, I want to be here. I'll give you a quick example. At Defense Logistics Agency, I was working with a customer who does IT services, but it's IT as an enablement to supply chain and logistics. And whenever we kept trying to call downstream to lower offices commands in DLA, they kept trying to push us to this IT, this one group who did IT, and they only did it one way, and they were completely closed-minded, only thought of it one way. What they didn't understand is that we wanted to talk to the people who actually used IT for their day-to-day jobs and discuss what are they doing with logistics, what are the challenges they're running into, et cetera. When they work with the various commands and services within DoD, what challenges do they have? And so when I put stuff in that said IT, we had challenges. When I took that out, when I took the capability statement out, and I just said we want to talk about supply chain and logistics, all of a sudden they were just, sure, come on in, we'll talk about it. And then when we talked about IT, they said, oh yeah, we'd love to talk with you about that. So it's a paradox, but a weird thing. Okay, number 8, no capability statement. One other thing, by the way, I do recommend when to send the capability statement. I've done another video where I say you want to send the capability statement as late as possible in the conversations that you're having, but before you have that intro meeting. So you probably want to send it 48 hours beforehand. And as long as you can control that process, you're engaging with this person in many different ways. You know, you're emailing back and forth to schedule a meeting, you're scheduling it, you're saying thank you. All these kind of things build the relationship. And so timing when that capability statement can happen is good. Okay, so number 9, mark it with your signature line. And the reason I provide this tip is because in the federal space, we always say, don't lead with your tags. If you're a woman-owned small business, don't lead with your tags. No one cares that you're a woman-owned small business or a veteran-owned small business. They're not going to give you anything because you are a veteran-owned business, and they're not really caring about whether they're hitting their goals in an agency. If they cared, they would have hit it years ago, right? But the problem is when you put a tag like, hey, I'm an 8A or I'm a hub zone company into the body of the email, the other person subliminally is starting to get distracted from what you want. Like for me, I use that example with the VA. I'm a data expert. I want to talk to you about data. I don't want to talk to you about a hub zone certification. I don't want to talk to you about hub zone small business set aside stuff, right? And so what I say is take your hub zone logo and other things and put them in your signature line. Of course, we want to let people know we're a woman-owned business or veteran-owned business because there are those set asides. There is this need for using small businesses. But when you put it down in the signature line, then they'll see it at their own convenience, but they won't see it as you trying to say, hey, look at me, I'm a woman-owned business, give me, a contract or something. It's like, no. So it's good to put it down there. And down there, I recommend you also put things like your GSAs. If you have a GSA schedule, put your GSA logo, because these things subliminally elevate you in a maturity level. If you're calling a small business, it's no big deal. But if you're calling an agency or a large, those things subliminally communicate to these people that you're procurement ready, that you're experienced within the federal government. And so putting it down there is a good thing to do, and pulling it out of the body makes sure the focus stays on your core competency and setting up the meeting, not tags. Okay, so number 10, and I'm actually going to get to 11 here. Number 10 is another way that you could actually increase the likelihood of your email landing a meeting is to get an introduction or name drop. And so what I mean from an introduction, let's use this guy, Mr. Paul at the VA. If I don't have direct access to him, I actually found his name and phone number, so that's not hard. But even if I'm worried about, if I reach out directly, is he going to say no, and then I can never come back from the no? Well, I can get an introduction. I can go to the small business specialist, as an example, and say, hey, could you introduce me to Mr. Paul? I read his strategy. I'm prepared. And that small business professional's job is to help the government be introduced to buyers that could potentially fit. If I can make my case to Molly, the small business professional, or John, the small business professional, that I would bring value to a conversation with Mr. Paul, then they'll make that introduction. And so that's what I mean by get an introduction. Find somebody who could bring you in there. The other thing is you could kind of name drop a little bit. And what I mean by this is this guy, Mr. Paul, who does the data, he's done a couple of podcasts. And so in my email, I might name drop, instead of the homework part, I might throw in something like, I just listened to you do the podcast with, Ed Sullivan. I don't know why I brought his name up, but I just watched you do the podcast with Ed Sullivan. I love the points you were making, especially this. And then I move into trying to set up the meeting. Well, what I'm doing is perhaps borrowed credibility of Ed Sullivan, who this guy likes and interviewed with. And maybe he goes, well, you watch me on there, I might as well, make some time available to you. Some will, some won't, right? But the idea is if you can give him some relevance that you're talking to somebody and name drop a little bit there, it's good. Never drop it falsely, right? I shouldn't have to say that. But when I say that I watched you participate in an event with somebody else, it all of a sudden brings me higher up in their visibility, and it increases my likelihood of getting a meeting. The next thing is the last tip, number 11 that I got here, is follow and engage them on LinkedIn. So using this guy again as an example, I just posted his stuff out on LinkedIn. I posted it on my own profile. I put out their, I can't remember how many pages it was, like a huge PDF. And then I summarized it and I tagged him, his boss, his peers. And so I put out what I thought would be something really useful to you on his behalf. Well, I might go over to him now because I do want to set up a meeting. He's the chief data officer for the VA. I might go over into his own profile and watch some of the stuff he's posting and see if it makes sense to engage. I might click on the, if you don't know this in LinkedIn, you can follow somebody, not just connect. And when you follow them, it basically is saying, I want to pay attention to what you're doing. Not so much that you pay attention to what I'm doing, but I want to pay attention. If you're saying anything on LinkedIn, I'm aware of it and I can learn from it. LinkedIn notifies Paul, Mr. Paul, hey, Neil's following you. And so now I got a little bit of visibility. When I go to reach out with an email, with a voicemail first and then the email, he might go, oh yeah, I just saw that guy was following me the other day. I might as well meet with him, right? All of these tips got to add up. None of them are silver bullets that instantly will get you what you look for. But when you follow them all, they're the process, right? They lead to the success you're looking for. So I'm running out of time here. I did want to just quickly say the outline and then, but I have an email handout. So I'm happy to send you a handout of what I talked about with the tips. Also this outline I'm about to tell you really quick. So in the chat, if you want a copy of my handout of what I talked about today, just put email handout and I'll get it to you as soon as I can. So the outline of an email, because I know a lot of you are like, hey, do you got a template? I'm not giving you a template, but I'll give you a framework and an outline. The first paragraph, remember 4 paragraphs, 150 characters each. First paragraph, I did my homework. Second one, company hook. Third one, request for intro to call. And fourth one, recommend that date and time. If I use the VA, Mr. Paul, as an example, my first paragraph, I read your data strategy, something, 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 right? My second paragraph, we've been supporting the DA or we've been supporting the DoD with data analytics, and we'd love to talk with you about it, right? I'm tying together all this stuff I do with DoD into the VA. The third paragraph, I'm hoping to find time on your schedule for an intro call, right? I'm not hoping for an intro call. I'm hoping to find time. Let's work that together and make it happen. By the way, fourth paragraph, to make it convenient, Mr. Paul, I'm available Tuesday or Thursday next week at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. East Coast time. If one of those times works for you, just let me know. Anyways, very fast fire hose into here of tips for how to write an email to get success. I use these all the time, and I can get pretty much in any door I want. With also that overall guideline, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But the ones I don't, it's a very rare thing. And when I really look at it, it's more likely that I just didn't belong there. It might not have been the best door for me to be knocking on. But you can do this same thing, right? I've got more experience, but if you follow this skill, you will have more meetings that will lead to more money. And theoretically in business, that's what we're looking for. Okay, so if you found value in this, please give me a thumbs up. It lets everybody else know out there in LinkedIn that we've got these events and training. And then keep in mind, tomorrow we've got another event. You can go into my profile and find it. And Gus might drop a link into the question. So, hey, keep in mind, there's somebody remembering the so what. Keep in mind, if you want the handout, drop it into the comments and I'll come back. If you had questions about anything I was saying today, let me know. And if you haven't been before, I come back and I go through all the comments. And if it's a question or if it's something I can answer for you pretty quickly, I will. Either way, though, I will respond to anything you put in the comments, whether it's now in this live event or if you're doing it on YouTube or some of the replays. We'll come back and make sure we answer, or I'll make sure I answer. Okay, I think we're good to go. Remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you next time.